You are listening to Paranormal Radio on 99.7 in Chicago and 104.1 in St. Louis. And now, once again, your host, the voice of darkness, Captain Jack.
Tonight, very special guests tonight. Noe and Ruben from Mexico's Roswell is here tonight to talk more with us. And they've actually come with some interesting stuff for us. Now, in case you missed the opening of the show, they are going to be on the new History Channel show, UFO Hunters, that's starting in February. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here in a moment. Ruben, Noe, are you with me?
This is Noe coming at you from Texas, and Ruben's here with us.
Fantastic.
I'm calling from the East Bay of Northern California.
So you guys aren't very far from each other. You guys are just a little hop and a jump and a skip.
Yeah, 2 time zones away, basically.
Yeah, good. Well, hey guys.
One of the really interesting things about all this, our collaboration, has been that the internet has afforded us whole new ways to transfer information back and forth. And even though we live so far apart, thousands of miles apart, we're constantly in communication with each other and sending files back and forth and pictures and talking to each other over the voice chat.
Right.
And it's just such a wonderful thing to have this technology at hand, and it has really helped us to open up some of these cases that haven't been looked at in quite a long time.
You just reminded me of something, and I'll talk to you about it off air, as a matter of fact. But I'm glad you said that, because it reminded me to ask you both. Have an important question, actually, for both of you. But I'll talk to you about that a little bit more. I want to bring everybody up to speed on this particular incident about your book and the information you have and the upcoming event on the History Channel. I want to bring everyone up to speed. So if you just kind of go through a little bit about the information behind the story. Let's start off with that.
Yes, this is one of the most amazing UFO stories that Ruben or I have ever heard. Ruben's been in the field of UFO investigations for over 20 years, member of MUFON. He's the director of the Northern California chapter of MUFON, and I've been a writer and researcher for a number of years as well, and have always been interested in UFOs and UFO cases, particularly in Texas and the Southwest. About 2 years ago, I heard this amazing story that a UFO had collided with a small plane in Southwest Texas, near the border with Mexico, in the area of Big Bend National Park, and just about 20 or 30 miles across the Rio Grande River into the area of the Chihuahuan Desert of northwestern Mexico. So I had heard that there was a crash. It had been rumored for years. It had been bouncing around on the old electronic bulletin board systems, VBSs, of the late 80s and early 90s. And the story had gotten out that this incident had occurred, that UFO had been spotted over the Gulf of Mexico inbound to Texas at over 2,000 miles per hour. It had been tracked by military radar as it rounded the southern tip of Texas and came into northern Mexico. And then at the same time that UFO was streaking across northern Mexico, there was a small passenger airplane taking off from El Paso Airport in West Texas, and it was headed down to Mexico City at the time. And it so happened that those two aircraft collided. According to the radar data that was looked at afterward, the 2 points on the radar became one. There was a collision right over the small Mexican village known as Coyame in the state of Chihuahua. That's a very small town, population is 600 people. And it's a story that gets even more amazing after the collision of the two aircraft, because then what happened next, Jack, was we had both the U.S. government and the Mexican government in an all-out race to recover the debris from that crash. And I know Ruben and I have looked at it. We've been down there where this happened. We've interviewed witnesses. we've spoken at numerous conferences and gotten a whole bunch of additional feedback. It continues to be a story that's very much open, brand new. It's like the early days of the Roswell, New Mexico UFO crash. It's every bit as exciting, and some people have said even more so.
Now, how did this information actually start getting leaked out about this incident?
Well, basically, back in the early 90s, there was this report that was released by some anonymous persons. This report was called the Denb report, and it was given to the late Dr. Leonard Stringfield, who was a researcher on crash retrievals, and it was also given to a number of other researchers, UFO investigators during that time. And there's another one. Her name is Elaine Douglas. She and a number of other researchers were involved in the on the information freedom, just cause, or they were trying to get the Washington to release any documents or files on UFOs in general. But as a result of that, the History Channel was doing a whole series of Roswell-type crashes and scenarios, and I got involved thanks through our international director for MUFON back then was Mr. John Schuessler. He had contacted me because I had some connections already with a number of UFO researchers in Mexico. So I had connected them with these researchers, and then I found out that they were then focusing a whole story on the Coyame crash that Noe just spoke about. And so they aired that on the program, and I was part of that segment there. And that's when Noe had saw the documentary, and then he had contacted me later, and we began collaborating notes and information, and we knew that there was a lot more to this whole case, which it's just totally has been a fascinating journey there, Jack.
You know, I have to admit that just from everything that you have told me about this and looking it up in all the information about this, and a lot of this information is, I mean, it happened way back in the 70s. I mean, we didn't know about it for a very, very long time, and so this is a very new case of all the information that's coming out about it. Am I correct?
It's very, very interesting that Roswell, New Mexico UFO crash 1947, it really did not break open until about 1978 or 9, when Stanton Friedman, who I notice is an upcoming guest on your show here in a few days, Stanton Friedman went down to Louisiana, and he first made contact with Jesse Marcel Sr., who was the Army intelligence officer at the Roswell Army Air Force Base at that time. And so 1979 was when the Roswell story was first started to develop based on Stanton's interview with Marcel, and then the subsequent publishing by Berlitz of the first book on the Roswell incident, which was published in 1980, 1981, that era. So, and what's really, really interesting, Jack, is that we have about the same time lag from 1974 to now as there was from the New Mexico Roswell incident in 47 to the time it first started opening. Now, one of the things that Ruben and I have speculated about this time lag is that you have military officials who have been involved in cases like this who are under the strictest orders to not divulge anything that they've seen in their involvement with these cases. But then, as it gets to the point where they're toward where they've left the military, they're in retirement, they're possibly nearing the end of their lives, and a lot of them will start reevaluating, what it was they experienced and wanting to go public with it, as is the case with Colonel Robert Willingham, whom we'll talk about later, and we have an audio clip from him. So this is our speculation as to why it takes 20, 30 years, sometimes more, for these types of stories to finally come out, as people who have experienced it firsthand finally get to the point in their lives where their silence, which they've been bullied and intimidated about, they finally decide that this is something that the world should know. Mm-hmm. Very brave people.
Yeah. Okay, so let me get this straight. In 1942, when the Roswell crash happened, I mean, it made the newspapers and everything else, and the government came out and said it was a weather balloon that went down. So after that, after they came out with their official report, that pretty much put the fire out on that story until 1979 when Stanton Friedman dug into it a little bit more.
That's correct. There had been no living witness that had stepped forward and said, I was involved in this incident. I saw firsthand that this happened. The story that was told by the military that it was a weather balloon was absolutely not true. Nobody had come forward with any of this until Stanton Friedman interviewed Jesse Marcel Sr. for the first time in Louisiana in 1979 as part of an investigation for a book that was subsequently written by Charles Berlitz, the famous travel writer, being the Roswell incident.
I just wanted to add, too, what also made this very substantial was the release of the MJ-12 documents that described the actual crash site went into depth about the Roswell crash back in 1947, as well as another crash, which one that we were really interested in was they mentioned another UFO crash near the Mexican-Texas border back in 1950 in Del Rio, in that area there. And so here
was the
you see
Eisenhower briefing document that Ruben's referring to, which was the first of the so-called MJ or Majestic 12 document. It was around the time that Stanton Friedman was doing his research on what exactly had happened in the Roswell 1947 crash that this document surfaced, which was a document that referenced these two UFO crashes, the 1947 crash near Roswell, New Mexico, and a crash along the Texas-Mexico border near Del Rio, Texas.
And what's interesting here, Jack, is here you have the parallel. You have the MJ-12 documents, and, of course, the witness there with Stanton Friedman and Jesse Marcel. Here we have, basically, both Noe and I have been evaluating this Denb report. And as Noe had mentioned, it happened in West Texas, and Noe's very familiar. Noe's from Texas, and he knows that area inside and out, which made this very, very interesting. Noe knows the geography. Maybe you may have mentioned that earlier, Noe, but if
when I first saw, I'm glad you point that out, Ruben, because when I first saw the Denb report, when I first read through it, I said, my God, at that time we hadn't really looked into it, but the first thing that came to my mind was that whoever wrote that had an intimate knowledge of the distances, the geography, the all the small towns, just the whole layout and landscape and the whole area of that very remote and isolated area of Texas that many people don't know very little about, and it doesn't even appear on most of the major road maps and atlases and things like that. So this is a very obscure little corner of West Texas and Northwest Mexico that not too many people are familiar with. The knowledge of what the military operations of the time were like, how a scenario like this would play out, all of this we've studied very carefully. We've taken the Denb report and broken it down basically word for word and checked with other UFO researchers on the plausibility of everything therein. And we came to the inescapable conclusion that this is a document that was leaked by people within the U.S. intelligence community at some point in the late 80s or early 90s, and it went out to several electronic VBS systems, and then it was also mailed out anonymously to Elaine Douglas and a number of other UFO researchers.
Someone
how it started.
In that group, someone who had access to this particular document, and now if this was a fake of any kind, usually you can, whenever they describe certain areas, usually they have no knowledge of geography and things. The things that you pointed out that really point to the fact that this is an authentic thing.
Yeah.
And whoever had personal contact with this within the government purposely wanted to get this information out.
Let me give you a quick example on how the report contains so many detailed and intimate bits of information that there would be so many chances for whoever put it together to slip up, and yet they didn't. They mention a tiny little town in West Texas called Candelaria. Not many people know about it. It doesn't even appear on most maps. It's located north of Presidio, Texas, which is the largest little town there. The population, I think the current population is like less than 50 people, and it's always been a very small, like one traffic light. It only recently has had a paved road that goes out to it, and it's right alongside the Rio Grande River. Now, the Denb report in 1980s, when the Denb report first started circulating, it mentions Candelaria, Texas, as a point where the U.S. military helicopters moved across the Rio Grande River into northern Mexico to make the recovery of the UFO artifacts at Coyame. And so, little details like that are just staggering in terms of the believability of this document.
Right. Well, one of the major questions that came up, and I got this in emails as well, after our first time having you on, people wanted to know if a UFO crashed into a small plane, there has to be a pilot, of course, and there has to be family members of this pilot. But as you pointed out, the 20-year lapse between it to where this thing has been kind of dead in the water for 20 years. No one has really started digging into this for so long. So there very well may be some family members out there that believe that their friend, their father, whomever was flying the plane, just died in an accident. And it's just, that's what the explanation was, and that's what they believe, and they probably don't even know that they were involved in this incident. Does that sound about right?
Well, yes, it works on both sides. Probably the lost loved ones of the airplane, as well as the lost loved ones of the Mexican military that were involved in the retrieval. Because as the story goes, the Mexican retrieval team was involved in finding the airplane, and then they discovered the disc, and all this was being monitored by the U.S. spy satellite system and by reconnaissance aircraft. The thing what happened was that the convoy that they were in suddenly stopped, and all the Mexican soldiers were basically exposed to some sort of agent. We're determining whether it's chemical, biological, or whatever. But what they found were that all the bodies they were dead. Yeah. All the soldiers died as a result of what they were exposed to. So it gets so that's the other thing that we're looking at, is that from that angle is whether we can get going out on. Well, both Noe and I have been on a couple occasions on the Spanish-speaking radio networks and sharing our story, and also working with other researchers from across the border to see if we can get any sort of documentation on it.
Right. Have you got anything? I mean, I know that right now Mexico, with all the UFO activity happening in Mexico, I mean, it's almost like an everyday occurrence for a lot of those people there, and so they're just like, oh, there it is again,
Well, the interesting thing about Mexico is that they take UFOs very seriously, and as we've been traveling and talking to folks and to UFO researchers in northern Mexico about this case and other cases, we have found that there is a high level of involvement and interest by them. They consider these objects to be real objects that have a paranormal explanation, not an earthly explanation. And they're very, very interested in the case that occurred at Coyame, Mexico, which they view as being every bit as important as the Roswell, New Mexico case of 1947. And I know Ruben has had a lot of dealings with the major UFO investigators in Mexico, and I'm sure he can enlighten us more on how important the whole UFO issue is to the Mexican people. It also ties in with the history and spirituality of the country.
It does. It has a lot. It goes way back to Mexico's indigenous populations and how that's been carried down to the present. And obviously, this in our research, which makes this even more interesting, and we'll get more into this, Jack, is that as we were doing our research, we came across a number of other references of other crashes along the U.S.-Mexican border. And going back, we mentioned the Denb report, and I was looking at the late Leonard Stringfield's materials here, and he mentioned that the Chihuahua report came to him from Elaine Douglas, who I mentioned earlier, who was involved with the Operation Right to Know, and they were picketing there in Washington, D.C., again, so they can get more publicity. Well, the letter was mailed out in December 1993. It was postmarked from Santa Ana, California.
Really?
That was the origin. That's where it came from. And as we were, it was mentioned the Denb report. It also mentioned in his research that he said that he felt that this really intrigued him because there was so much detail, as Noe had mentioned, about the military operations that were involved. So that made it really much more realistic. But he was also saying in one of his late retrieval documents, UFO crash retrievals is the cover-up lid lifting. This was back in 1989. He also came across another interesting report back in 1948 when there was a U.S. naval team that was from the USS McKinley. And they were docked in San Diego, and it was a command ship. It was for cargo class for amphibious operations, and basically they were there. They just came back from a certain area in Mexico. And they had retrieved a flying saucer. And the way they found out from first-hand source was there was a messenger that was on the vessel where he overheard the task force personnel talking about that they also had come back with dead bodies along with the crash. And so this is what may happen. But he also was very he stated that as he was more informed about UFO crash retrievals, that he was warned several days later by the CIA that they said it would be inadvisable for him to reveal any information about UFOs in Mexico, and the other country was West Germany. Now, that was really interesting. But what he was looking at was the fact that that he felt that basically what he suspected, that there was an ongoing illegal entries into the United States to recover alien craft. And we had talked about before the Project Moondust and Blue Fly, where those were the operations that the U.S. and CIA had to retrieve satellites or hardware from the Soviet Union or from Russia at that time, which was a cover-up to retrieve what we feel were the actual UFOs that over the period of time that we've been researching.
I want to add quickly that the fact of the discussion about whether or not these were legal or illegal entries into Mexico has been kind of debated somewhat, because we've also uncovered evidence that at higher levels of government, at unofficial kind of informal channels have been established over the years between the U.S. and Mexico that might have facilitated the entry of teams to go in and make recoveries like this. So it may have been, on the surface, it may have appeared illegal, but there might have been some informal channels open and certainly, as was the case with the recovery of several military missiles and experimental aircraft that went astray into northern Mexico, there were a number of occasions when the U.S. was allowed to go in and recover its hardware.
Okay.
That's where we started to find that link between the cooperation between the governments on both sides of the border on other crashes.
Right.
If a UFO has crashed and the U.S. government is insisting it was an experimental aircraft of theirs, it's quite likely that the government of Mexico is going to allow that recovery effort,
right,
as has been the case.
Well, how would that work? Because I don't think. I mean, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think that the Mexican military have any type of experimental aircraft that they say, oh well, it kind of went down on your side, we have to come get it. You know what I mean?
No,
they would have to say. They would have to say, look, we had something in our airspace that has been in our airspace and suddenly went down on your side, and it's close enough to us. Isn't that kind of the case that happened? Isn't that kind of what happened with this incident? That it happened right there on the border, and Mexico said, hey, we're going to go do a recovery effort. They were tracking this object that was flying through their airspace, and then saw on radar that it hit the plane. Isn't that how that kind of
played out? Actually, the Mexicans' position right away was that all this was a crash of a small plane of Mexican registry. See, the plane that took off from El Paso International Airport was of Mexican registry.
Oh.
We've established that much. It was headed back to Mexico City, its home base. And so the Mexican government was saying, we've got a small airplane crash. We're sending a spotter plane in the morning to recover it. Just stand down, all you U.S. guys that are listening in on the border. We're going to handle this. We're going to take care of this. Now, the Mexican troops get out to the site, and they find the wreckage of the small plane. That's not a problem. Right. But a short distance away, the Mexican spotter plane, probably dispatched out of Chihuahua City, sees a circular silver disc sticking in the ground there, not far away from the wreckage of the plane. The small plane, by the way, had been almost completely obliterated in the crash. But the silver disc was nearly intact. It had a couple of damage points on its hull, on its outer hull, but it was otherwise fairly well intact. So at that point, there was just some momentary radio traffic from the Mexicans back to Chihuahua, the Mexican spotter plane, talking about a second object, a silver circular object on the ground. And suddenly, one of the Mexican controllers from Chihuahua Air Force Base came on the line and said, obviously a superior military superior officer came on the line and ordered radio silence from that point on. So the U.S. surveillance people on the border and at El Paso at that point were basically in the dark about what was happening after that.
Right.
And obviously at that point it was something more than just the crash of a small plane.
So the American military went in after that, right? And that's whenever they found the bodies, the human bodies of some died mysteriously?
The first ones to go in was the Mexican team. I want to turn this over to Ruben because he has explored this extensively. But the Mexican recovery team, probably dispatched out of Ojinaga Army Base, just a short distance away from the site. They first went out there with we estimate up to 24 Mexican soldiers with a couple of big trucks and various other military vehicles. Went out to make the recovery of the aircraft debris, and Ruben can pick up the story from there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add this whole story, as Noe was mentioning, Presidio, Texas, or Ojinaga. It's the small little border town right across from Presidio, and I guess how many miles is El Paso from there, Noe? About 100, approximately, around there?
It'd be about 150
miles. About 2 hours. Well, right there you have Fort Bliss, which is one of the largest Army bases in the United States. And just to regress just a little bit, we were talking about entries into Mexican airspace. In our book, we have a whole chapter devoted to the whole V-2 rocket program and a couple of other missiles that went astray and crashed into the Mexican side of the border. We have two incidents of V-2 rockets that were launched out of Fort Bliss in a crash in Juarez, Juarez, Mexico, right along the border there by El Paso. And U.S. Obviously they apologized. They went in there, they retrieved the missile, and then I believe the second missile they were a little more reluctant to say we blew it again. And then there was another missile that was launched back in '67, which crashed nearby that Coyame area. And then we had another one that was launched out of Utah in 1970, I believe, that was an Athena rocket that was launched out of Utah. And that crashed in what's known as the zone of silence. That's the area in Mexico, northern Mexico. It's like it was considered Mexico's Bermuda Triangle. A lot of strange anomalies that go on there. But this particular missile crashed, and it had radiation material with it. There was cobalt-54. There was contamination. So it was a big embarrassment among U.S. officials to go in and say, we've launched 4 missiles that we're aware of, at least. It came out in public. But then we started then as we were doing the research, we're saying, well, it's an easy way to say it's one of ours. It's another one of our planes. And not only that, but there was the U-2 spy plane program. When we were doing our research there, we found that the U-2 was developed, and much of it was tested in the state of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
In Del Rio, Texas, yeah.
Del Rio, Texas, yeah.
Yeah, Del Rio, Texas was the base for all the U-2 development of the U-2 spy plane in the 50s and early 60s. There were a number of U-2 spy planes that crashed. The crash sites were immediately cordoned off. Nobody was allowed anywhere near there. Any airplanes that were trying to fly over the area were diverted. It was the top super secret military aircraft of its day in the late 50s and early 60s. And it was very, very interesting. I just read an article in U.S. News and World Report last week about how the U-2 continues to be the top spy and reconnaissance aircraft. It's now being used in the Middle East, in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this has been a long term, although it's not secret as it was back then. The U-2, and I was thinking, Jack, as Ruben was mentioning all these various crashes, you had all this U.S. military hardware that was basically raining down on northern Mexico, and you had a number of precedents established where the U.S. would go in to recover its hardware. So, I mean, it's not that strange of a deal when we talk about 74 UFO crash in Coyame. That the U.S. would go in when the crash site, the recovery site, was within 20 or 30 miles of the Texas border.
Right.
And as we talked about on the last show, there was obviously something that had caused the deaths of as many as 24 Mexican soldiers, possibly chemical, biological, or some kind of radiation.
Right.
And obviously there was a vested interest on the part of the U.S. authorities on the border to make sure that whatever that contamination was, it wasn't spread by wind or whatever natural factors, just 20 miles away to Texas.
Yeah.
I think I may have shared with you. This is still mind blowing for me. It's just, we're talking about Mexico's Andromeda strain, and I believe we shared it at the last program how Noe he had told me that the movie was filmed out of this little town of Shafter, which is only about 30-40 miles, Noe, from Presidio.
That's right. So this was, in effect, it was an Andromeda strain scenario that we're talking about. There was always the worry, and I have found several papers that were published in the 60s, there was a worry that that space debris, such as a falling satellite, might bring back with it some kind of contaminant that might spread across the population like wildfire. So that was one of the motivations for Project Scoop and Project Moon Dust and all of these projects to recover crashed space debris.
Well, you know what? Let me stop you right there, because we're well past the time to take a break. Let me stop you right there, because that is a fascinating aspect of this case. The fact that these the Mexican military had gone in there to recover the wreckage, and then were found dead from something. What it was, we don't know. But the history of where the debris went to within the United States kind of points to a biological aspect to it. We'll talk a little bit more about that whenever we come back. So stay right there. Listeners, you stay right there. This is Paranormal Radio. I'm your host, Captain Jack. And when we come back, we'll be talking more about this. And can you tell that I'm still sick? Jeez, I'll be getting rid of this soon, I hope. Stick around, don't go away. Next goes Roswell. And way, way more.
You are listening to Paranormal Radio on 99.7 in Chicago and 104.1 in St. Louis. And now, once again, your host, the voice of darkness, Captain Jack.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Paranormal Radio. Now listen closely to what I'm about to play for you. Real close. Here it is. This is...
We have an unidentified flying object.
We're sitting on a bombshell here. This is an incredible photo. Look at that. Look, this is a new Roswell.
There are definitely things that are unidentified that are flying. NASA and the Pentagon have been covering up UFOs since the 1960s.
No pilot is going to report that he saw a UFO.
You're looking at a UFO. Yes, there's a plane.
Is it going to be dropping down there?
How do you explain something that you can't explain?
Coming in February, the History Channel, UFO Hunters. An amazing, amazing story that's going to be told. But you're hearing about it right here on Paranormal Radio. My guests tonight, Ruben and Noe from Mexico's Roswell. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Yes, we're happy to be on again tonight. Thank you for inviting us.
Oh, the first time you were on, there was just so much to this story that we didn't even, I think, that we didn't even scratch the surface of all the stuff that's behind all of this. So I felt that it was important to bring you guys back on and talk about this. Now, you had sent over some audio stuff. Now, the first half of the show, for anyone that's just tuning in, I wanted to bring everybody up to speed of this, because it's a new story. I mean, all the stuff, it's really in its infancy stages, correct?
That's right, and that's what's so exciting about it, is that it's like when we were talking about earlier, when the Roswell, New Mexico crash first started to break in the late 70s. Stan Friedman was talking to witnesses, and we're right at the cutting edge, at the leading edge of this whole new case.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much information that's coming out, but let's talk about the audio files you sent over to me. These are very, very interesting. I had a chance to listen to them.
Right.
During the break. So why don't you bring us up to speed on what we're about to hear?
Now, we've been of course investigating this incident. We've been spending a lot of time. Ruben will join us here shortly. He got disconnected, and you all will be bringing him back in here shortly. But as we talk about this case, we have also found out about other similar cases that occurred around the same time in northern Mexico. And one of the audio recordings that we're going to be listening to here in a little bit involves a very famous case of a Mexican pilot. And this occurred just a few months after the 1934 Coyame UFO crash. Just a few months after that, there was a very famous incident in the skies over Mexico where the pilot of a small plane, pilot and lone occupant of a small plane, was surrounded by several UFO discs. They were of the approximate size and description of the UFO that crashed in Coyame just a few months before this.
Okay.
And the pilot's name, Carlos de los Santos, whom we've talked to, Ruben has talked to in person on numerous occasions, has interviewed him for television, both in Mexico and the U.S., very credible witness.
We're getting Ruben back on the line right now, as a matter of fact. Jimmy is dialing into him.
Right.
So we can get him connected here.
Ruben's going to join in on this here shortly. But you had this very credible witness.
Hello, thank you.
You had this very credible witness. Yeah, Ruben's back with us. And Ruben, we were just talking about Carlos de los Santos, the pilot in Mexico whose small aircraft was surrounded by several UFO discs that actually made physical contact with his plane. He was involved in this harrowing incident that was all recorded on tape from the cockpit radio back to his conversation with the air traffic controllers at Mexico City's airport.
Yeah.
And we're going to hear a small segment of that in a little bit. And this guy was just screaming at the top of his lungs, "Mayday, Mayday, there are 3 objects surrounding me. I have no control of my aircraft." And Ruben, what are some of the high points of this case? I know you've been intimately involved in the investigation of it since nearly the time that it happened.
Yeah, I mean, what we find a little fascinating there, Jack, is we had the opportunity of interviewing him, and I mean, he's a no-nonsense guy. This event changed his life, basically, and the fact that there were a number of other witnesses that saw this, primarily from the air traffic controllers there in Mexico City. They got the radar blips showing that his craft was surrounded by these objects, and of course, having the actual testimony or his whole ordeal being tape recorded. And so this comes actually from the air traffic controllers here in Mexico. A little segment that we're going to be hearing.
All right. Well, why don't we?
A pilot in terror.
Why don't we play that now?
Okay.
Here is that audio of that pilot. Now,
I know it's in Spanish, but I mean, really, Jack. I mean, you don't get it. It doesn't come any better than that. I mean, when you have a pilot there that describing what's going on with him, where he has he has no control of his airplane.
Right.
He has these 3 objects. One actually hit underneath the fuselage of his airplane, and that's when he flew, which is. There's a part 2 to this when he actually flew back, but he had no control of his airplane for approximately 18 minutes, and they took his airplane from 10,000 feet to up to 14,000 feet, and his biggest fear was the fact that he had no oxygen, and his plane was not pressurized for that particular model, so that was a big concern. And he told me, and he said, I was praying, I was crying, I was trying to relay all this information to the air traffic officials back in Mexico City. The other thing is that they actually sent out another plane that was in the vicinity to actually fly where he was at, and they too had saw these three strange objects around his plane.
Really?
So we got the testimony based on on that report there, which is also included in our book. But one of the reasons why, again, we were tying this into our Coyame crash, into the Coyame incident, is the fact that here you have a small plane flying and encountering a small disc, just like the one that happened in the as described in the Denb report, and this was 9 months later. So this is the tie-in. Of course, his story gets more fascinating because later, when he returned back to Mexico City, he was interviewed. J. Allen Hynek even went down to interview him.
Uh-huh.
And what's real fascinating was his whole story gets even more bizarre, that the so-called men in black, there were these strange guys that were telling him you were not to say anything about this incident.
Really?
And he was actually threatened. So, yeah, it's a real fascinating story, but Carlos is still alive and well, and it's just part of the ongoing stories that are coming out of Mexico, as well as how it's impacting the general aviation community, not only in Mexico but throughout the world.
Now, how did you track him down?
Actually, well, it's real interesting. It's like how Noe and I connected. About 10 years ago, I had the opportunity of visiting Jaime Maussan. He's one of the leading journalists and investigative reporters in Mexico. Of course, he's well noted for his investigations of UFOs in Mexico as well as throughout the world. And one of his assistants gave me this tape of the actual interview. Well, I heard it, but I didn't realize that I had a gem later on.
Mm-hmm.
But I had it for a number of years, and then when I'm also part of the another organization called NARCAP, National Aviation Center for Anomalous Phenomena, which basically is geared toward air safety and how it deals with unidentified aerial phenomena and its impact on aviation safety. One of our researchers in Mexico, who's with MUFON, he's our MUFON International representative, did an in-depth interview with him on the Mexican aviation cases. And when I read his case and then I connected with the tape that I had, I said, oh, we got to meet this individual. So we had a chance to go down to Mexico City several years ago, right in March of 2004. What's interesting about that, Jack, do you recall the Mexican Air Force when they released their videos of when it was a C-21 Merlin aircraft that was flying on patrol out in the Yucatan area?
Yeah.
Their plane was completely surrounded by objects.
Right. Now,
and they had encountered that.
There's
it was
something
picked up on their first system.
There's something very interesting about that, because there's some new developments out on that particular video. They were looking out their window. They couldn't see anything on film or with their naked eye, but they were picking these things up on their thermal camera. Now, this particular plane was actually searching for drug traffickers, wasn't it? Wasn't that the case? The drug traffickers? Yeah. That's what it was for? And so they were picking this up with this sophisticated thermal imagery equipment, but yet they couldn't see anything physically, which is very interesting because of the fact that whenever it comes to UFOs, I know there's been a lot of studies, actually, of putting two cameras in tandem, one of them thermal imagery, the other standard high megapixel cameras, focusing them on the sky, and the thermal imagery camera actually picks up UFOs, which the other camera does not in the same area. There's something very unusual about that. And so I know that just recently, with that particular video of the things surrounding this plane, I think there was like 19 of them that they were picking up on this camera. They had gone out and they had investigated to see exactly what this could be. Turns out that, well, this is what they're explaining it as. Those objects that you see that look so high up in the air were actually from these oil well oil rigs far out releasing the flames coming out. I mean, that was the newest thing that came out about it, correct?
Well, yeah, that's part of the argument there. And this, the reason why I'm bringing this up is that when we went to interview Mr. Carlos de los Santos, we also had the opportunity of interviewing a couple of the other air traffic controllers, and they had told us that for the first time the Secretary of Defense was releasing a video where it had their military personnel was actually involved with something quite unusual. And we had privileged information because this was not released to the general public. This was told to us about 2 weeks prior to the big press conference that Mr. Jaime Maussan had conducted in Mexico City. So the issue about it being the FLIR picking up the thermal images from the oil refineries out there, there's still some controversy among the various experts. Some do claim that that's what it was, but on the other hand, these guys are well-seasoned pilots. They fly in that area. I mean, it's not like they were trained by U.S. military. All the equipment was certified. So that's the other question: is how in the heck could that be mistaken for FLIR when they're from with all the oil refineries out there, when they're very much flown that particular area for a period of time.
Right.
So those are the different arguments that keep coming up. So again, going back to De Los Santos and how that relates to Coyame, I mentioned the men in black actually threatening him. But one of the things that we're coming across in our research again is what is the relation between the Mexican military, or the Mexican government with the U.S.?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we do know is that the CIA has a very large operation in Mexico City. Their headquarters there. And obviously, one of the big concerns is the whole monitoring of Latin American affairs. We're talking from Cuba to Central America down to South America, but it's a perfect base for them. The other thing that Mexico City is the headquarters for the international region of, they call it ICAO, which is basically the world is divided up into 9 or 10 major regions, and basically they form the standards for aviation safety, for runways, and a number of other specifications. So the fact that it's headquartered in Mexico City, and it basically governs Mexico, United States, and Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the other interesting relationship we have with these agencies there in that part of the country there.
Right. Huh. Okay, so tell me about this next audio that we have here, where the UFOs are over Texas.
Okay. This is in the course of our investigation of the 1974 crash at Coyame, Chihuahua, Mexico. We started hearing about other crash events that had occurred over the years along the Texas-Mexico border.
Mm-hmm.
We checked into them, of course. We include information in our book. For example, we've already talked about the crash of various missiles fired from New Mexico and other points in the U.S. that landed in northern Mexico, experimental aircraft. There was a supposed crash of a U.S. highly experimental aircraft along the Texas-Mexico border near Del Rio in approximately 1948. Near Laredo, Texas, in approximately 1948. So we were looking into these other crash events. Some of them had earthly explanations. Some of them do not have an explanation yet, such as 1974 Coyame. One of the ones we ran across was another case, and when we were investigating crashes that occurred along the Texas-Mexico border, people told us, well, there's this case I remember that happened in the 50s, and I remember that a gentleman, I think he was an Air Force colonel, had come forth, and he was a fighter pilot, and he claimed to have chased a UFO across the state of Texas, and he witnessed it crashing along the border between Texas and Mexico. I think it happened near Del Rio, Texas. That was the information we were getting. So we tracked this down, and it so happened that the Air Force pilot in question, Colonel Robert Willingham, who now lives near Wichita Falls, is still living. He's in his early 80s, and he was interviewed by Dallas television station in the year 2000. They had a series of UFO shows called the Tex Files about Texas UFO cases. And one of the featured cases that they, during their series of shows, was an interview with Robert Willingham, this retired Air Force colonel who had this famous UFO incident in the 1950s. And now when I say famous, is there was very little information that had been released because he wasn't comfortable with talking a lot about it. And but we decided to follow up here within the last year and a half or so. We through the documentary that was filmed by the Dallas TV station, we talked to the personnel there, and they gave us a lead on where to find Colonel Willingham. We located him where he lives now, and so he started opening up to us, and we have spent hours talking to him about the case. We've been to his house there near Wichita Falls. We've interviewed him on camera. We've interviewed him on tape, and the story started unfolding. Now, all these years after it actually happened, he has finally come to the point in his life, as we were talking about earlier, a lot of times happens with retired military personnel. Once they get past the feeling of threat and intimidation to come out to the public with information like this, now he's starting to feel comfortable about that, and he's finally decided that he's going to tell us the whole story. So we're going to hear an audio clip, one of the first interviews we did with him, that just kind of blew our minds away when he started talking about his encounter with this very bright, large UFO that was streaking across the skies of Texas at about 2,000 miles per hour and did a 90-degree turn right in front of him and his fellow pilot, and then started descending to an eventual crash landing along the border there.
Yeah, I just want to picture yourself with that, Jack. I mean, you're a fighter pilot. You're flying an F-86. There's 4 of you flying information. You're flying a bomber escort or a group of B-47s, and all of a sudden you see this bright object coming right toward you.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
He said it was as bright as the sun in the middle of the day, and streaking very fast across the sky.
And the whole fact of it doing a 90-degree turn at that speed is just unimaginable. All right, let's see here. All right, let's play this on.
Yeah, we were in Texas. The aircraft that we were flying cover for was out of New York. It's B-52s we was flying cover for.
Oh, okay.
And B-47s.
The B-47s and B-52s.
Yeah.
Wow. What kind of plane were you flying in?
F-86s.
Okay. When you were on your mission, did you see something? You and your.
Yeah, we were going across there, and one of the bomber pilots called me. He said, "What is that you see up in front of us there? Up about another 20 degrees." And I looked up there, and it was a great big, pretty, looked like stars, you know. And I said, "No, that's not no star." And about that time, it made a 90-degree turn to the right.
Wow.
And doing about 2,000 miles an hour. And I knew that wasn't no airplane either. And went on over there a little bit, and I said, when we get through here, I'm going to go look at that. And so they went on to Washington, state of Washington.
I see.
And another fighter escort picked them up over there Arizona, and I turned around and went back to Fort Worth, and then I got in a small plane and went down there where that thing looked like it crashed.
So this thing, as he's chasing it, as he's following it, this thing actually, it dived and crashed, and he went out there, didn't he?
It's an amazing story. What follows the clip that we heard there is that he actually saw the object crash. But before it crashed, it had dipped down to a very low altitude, and it was having trouble maintaining its altitude and its flight path. It started wobbling, and it nearly took the roof off a house there at a residence on the Texas side before it crashed there just south of Langtree, Texas, along the border. And he flew in his F-86. He brought it down lower than the recommended altitude. Right, and he wanted to see, and he saw that object impacted into the side of a hill right on the south bank of the Rio Grande River. And it was at that point that he became determined in his mind that he needed to go turn in his F-86 and come back to the site as soon as possible in a smaller airplane that could land there in that area, because he wanted to know what this was and that they were dealing with. Right. So at that point, he asked for permission to do that.
And did he get it?
Yeah, the amazing series of events is he returned. He asked permission. He returned to the formation that the other aircraft that he was flying with. He asked permission to return to base and was given it. He went back to base, turned in his F-86, and immediately went to another nearby airfield in Corsicana, the old Corsicana Army airfield, which is about. He was given a lift by another pilot over to the Corsicana airfield, and he picked up an aircraft that is known as an Aeronica, and it was a small two-seater. Pilot with a passenger in the back, and it was used by the Civil Air Patrol there in Corsicana, which he was a member of. So that was the plane that he took back down to the border, and he was able to land it down there right at the crash site.
Wow.
Hey, to get to more bizarre there, Jack, you're going to see a connection between this incident and Roswell.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have time, or how are we?
Well, yeah, we have about 15 minutes before the next break. But, I'm sitting here, I'm listening to this, and it's an amazing story with all the different facets to this story. It's just, my mind is just spinning from it all.
It's better than science fiction.
Yes, it really is.
Go ahead,
Another very interesting point I was going to bring out, Ruben, is that Colonel Willingham first told his story in the 1960s.
Yeah.
He just gave very few details, very sketchy details, because he had been bullied and told by his superiors that he was not to speak about this ever, or that he would face serious consequences. And he told a newspaper reporter in Pennsylvania, where he was stationed at the time, that he told it within the context of the famous Kecksburg, Pennsylvania UFO crash of 1965. It was within that context, and shortly thereafter, that he was interviewed through the fact that he was involved with the Civil Air Patrol in that area of Pennsylvania near Kecksburg. He was actually interviewed by a newspaper reporter. And he said, and he kind of mentioned it sort of like in passing. He said, when I was in the military, I was involved in an incident where a UFO crashed on the border between Texas and Mexico. And it's just mentioned like that in the newspaper article from the 60s. And then basically nothing happened with the story until a number of years later when it was picked up by UFO researchers who then began, looking into it. So But the most interesting aspect of it is what he saw when he arrived in that small airplane. He and another man who functioned as his co-pilot, the two gentlemen arrived there and landed that small plane on the riverbanks there at the Rio Grande, south of Lime Tree, Texas, and they saw this silver object sticking in the side of a sandbar, basically a small hill. And by the time they arrived, the object was surrounded by and cordoned off by Mexican military officers, and who were, of course, armed, and they were not about to let anybody near that crash site. And an amazing series of events unfolded after that, which Ruben can give us more details on that.
Yeah, well, what happened was when, as Noe mentioned, he landed his airplane, him and his other partner right there across the river bank, and they crossed right on there from the U.S. side onto Mexican soil. And he was met by a Mexican soldier, and Willingham spoke a little Spanish, and basically the soldier told him that they were waiting from someone from the United States Air Force to arrive. And Willingham said, "Well, I am the United States Air Force." So he brought him closer to the wreckage, and Willingham was looking at. It was getting dark, but he saw this wreckage and saw pieces and everything else. And one of his concerns was the fact that it was getting very dark, and they had to get that plane back. So as he's leaving, he found a piece of metal that he picked up, and he put that in his pocket, and he went back into his airplane, and he flew back to Corsica. And basically later he started showing this piece of metal to other personnel there, and then later the higher echelon became aware of what he had. Then he was ordered to take that metal to a marine lab up there in Maryland, I believe. And what had happened there was that one thing about Willingham, his background, he's a no-nonsense guy, but this is a man who was a soldier. He fought in World War II. He was with the 82nd Airborne. He always loved flying. He became a pilot, transitioned from the U.S. Army when the Air Force was created. He was a fighter pilot in Korea, flew P-51s, supporting the troops from the communist North Chinese and Koreans, North Koreans at the time. And so he got injured in a raid there, and then he was hospitalized in Japan. And so later he was transferred back to Texas, and then through his rehabilitation, later he got back into flying, and then he was part of the Texas Air Force Reserve there.
Right.
So during that time, they were flying support missions. They were doing a lot of Cold War exercises during that time. The thing about what had happened was he also, his background, he was a metallurgist. He knew a lot about metals. So he grinded this metal. He said he cut it here and there, and it just would not cut. There was something totally different. Now let's go back. We need to go back to Roswell. Same story. Same story of Jesse Marcel uncovering pieces of metal, wreckage strewed across that part throughout the plane, and that they also had accumulated wreckage. But then, as you know, the story goes, there was a whole cover-up that it was a balloon.
Right.
Well, with Willingham,
4 or 5 different stories of exactly what it was. But
right. And it gets a little more bizarre. And Noe, if you want to jump in here, because the results.
Well, it's very interesting because he's given us a detailed sketch of this mysterious square piece of metal. It's approximately the size of a human hand in terms of size, and it's kind of jagged because it was obviously blown away from a larger component.
Right.
But the edges of it have a sequence of honeycombed holes in them, and then along the sides you've got some ridges running along the left and right sides, and the top and bottom of it are kind of curved. The top is kind of curved, and it's silverish, generally silverish in color. And he, no matter how he tried to cut, he tried high-intensity, high-heat torches and various other attempts to mar the surface of that. It could not be marred. He says that it would warm up, but he never was able to scratch it or cut it or make any sort of.
So unlike the conventional metal, whenever you cut it, normally it heats up just from the friction of being cut, and this wouldn't cut, but the friction transfer, it would at least warm it up a little bit.
It would warm it up, but he noticed that the heat would dissipate very quickly, something that he attributed to the honeycomb pattern of holes that dotted all around the outside of it. He has never seen anything like this. You know, when we started interviewing Colonel Willingham, we were asking him things like, well, could what you saw have been a crashed U-2 spy plane? You know, the military was very protective of that.
Right.
And this was the era when that was being tested. Could it have been some other kind of experimental aircraft or U.S. missile that had gone down? And, you know, he got to the point, he was saying, of course, all along, he said, no, this couldn't have been. But finally he told us, you know, you can say just about anything you want about what this craft that I saw might have been, but that object that I held in my hand was a piece of something that was not made on this earth and was not made from human hands. And he received a letter back from the lieutenant, from the Marine lieutenant with whom he left that piece of metal in Maryland. Although the lieutenant had been ordered not to divulge any information and the lab had been virtually moved overnight, and Willingham was never told what the results of the test were, Willingham himself received a letter from this man some months later and it was a very cryptic sounding note, and it had no return address, but the gentleman told him, the piece of metal that you turned in to us, we have never tested anything like it. There is no such metal that we know of on the earth. And that was it.
Now,
that's the last that he heard about that metallic debris that he found at the crash site.
Some of the information, the incidents of that day, being the fact that he was in the military, would he have had to have filled out any type of reports or anything of that nature that would eventually go on to possibly?
He was ordered to give a detailed report of his experience after he returned to base. He did fill out a written report, which he would very much like to know what has happened to it. You know, he was never, of course, told what the disposition of it was or where it might be now. We don't know. He also had a very interesting briefing that involved him and some of the other pilots that were flying when the object basically buzzed them in the sky. And the other pilots all saw the bright object streak across the sky past them.
Right.
Now, Willingham was the only one who received permission to turn his F-86 and pursue the object. One of the person in charge of the squadron told him to go down and see what it was and give a full report to the commanding officer back at the base. So he did that. But the others didn't see the crash and the subsequent crashed spacecraft. But they did have the initial sighting, and that all came out in the briefing that was held with the base commander after the incident.
Right. So there's no way of seeing if you could track some of this information down through the Freedom of Information Act and getting one of those wonderful blacked out documents that I'm so familiar with.
But you know, by all by all measures or by all procedures of the time, this report should have ended up in Blue Book, because Blue Book was the active agency at the time that was investigating all anomalous aircraft sightings. But this was one of many incidents that occurred, UFO incidents that occurred that involved military personnel in the 1950s and 60s that were not included in Blue Book. In fact, many people would argue were deliberately excluded from Blue Book.
Oh, yeah. I think that the real important stuff of the Blue Book investigation has been put into one book, and all the stuff that dismisses it away is slapped into the Blue Book for the public release. I believe that.
The Blue Book was basically a PR effort on the part of the military to explain away UFOs and to kind of calm down the American public in terms of there had been a rash of UFO sightings all throughout the 50s. People were, military officials were concerned that this could impact the U.S.'s Cold War position with the Russia to have Americans constantly sighting things in the sky. And so, I mean, there was an effort underway to kind of try to get everybody calmed down and try to get this UFO issue under control. Yeah. We certainly didn't want the American public to think that the U.S. was not in control of its own sky.
Space, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the real heavy stuff, as you say, that was really happening and that involved military personnel was never really made it to the official Blue Book.
Yeah.
I have Edward Ruppelt's book, The Report of Unidentified Flying Objects, that was came out in 1956, and he says something here really interesting. It just ties into what we're saying here and talking about. He says that the report has been difficult to write because it involves something that doesn't officially exist. He says that it is well known that ever since the first flying saucer was reported in June 1947, the Air Force has officially said that there is no proof that such a thing as interplanetary spaceships exist. But what is not well known is that this conclusion is far from being unanimous among the military and their scientific advisors because of one word, proof. So the investigation continues. He says here, and this is really profound for me, he says, the hassle over the word proof boils down to one question. What constitutes proof? Does the UFO have to land at the river entrance to the Pentagon, near the Joint Chiefs of Staff offices? Or is it proof when a ground radar station detects a UFO, sends a jet to intercept it, or the jet pilot sees it and locks on with his radar, only to have a UFO streak away at a phenomenal speed? Is it proof when a jet pilot fires at a UFO and sticks to his story even under threat of court-martial? Does this constitute proof? The at times hotly debated answer to this question may be the answer to the question, do the UFOs really exist? I'll give you the facts, all the facts, you decide. July 1955. July of 1955.
All right, hold it right there. That music tells us we got to take a break. Good note to go out on, because when we come back, let's explore that a little bit. Let's go through the fact of, at this particular time, you've got Blue Book, you've got the Majestic 12, you've got all these government documents that eventually got leaked out that says straightforward that, yeah, something was going on. And you're right when it comes to the Blue Book investigation, Operation Blue Book. You're right when you say that was definitely a PR campaign. 100%. All right, stick around. We'll be right back. This is Paranormal Radio. I'm your host, Captain Jack. And tonight, my guests, Ruben and Noe from Mexico's Roswell. Fantastic guys, lots of information, and we got more for you coming up.
Listening to Paranormal Radio on 99.7 in Chicago and 104.1 in St. Louis. And now, once again, your host, the voice of darkness, Captain Jack.
Indeed, that is me, Captain Jack, here, Paranormal Radio, 99.7 FM Chicago, 104.1 St. Louis. You can email me, CaptainJack@WPRTradio.com, if you have any questions for our guests tonight. Our guests are Ruben and Noe from Mexico's Roswell. Very, very interesting story. And let me just throw this in there one more time real quickly. This is very, very interesting.
Yeah, we were in Texas. The aircraft that we were flying cover for was out of New York. We had some B-52s we was flying cover for.
Oh, okay.
And B-47s.
The B-47s and B-52s.
Yeah.
Wow. What kind of plane were you flying in?
F-86s.
Okay. When you were on your mission, did you see something? You and your.
Yeah, we were going across there, and one of the bomber pilots called me. And he said, "What is that you see up in front of us there? Up about another 20 degrees." And I looked up there, and a great big, pretty, looked like stars, you know. And I said, "No, that's not no star." And about that time, it made a 90-degree turn to the right.
Wow.
And during about aircraft that can do that even today.
Yeah.
And so we knew, you know, flying in the 1950s to see this thing come streaking across the sky at over 2,000 miles per hour and then do a straight 90-degree turn.
Yeah.
That was not anything that was made by us or anybody on the air.
Yeah, if they were doing that back then, if they had any type of experimental aircraft or military aircraft of any type that was super top secret that could do that, you could imagine what we would have now.
Yeah.
You know.
Jack, the title of this upcoming book, it's called The Other Roswell, UFO Crash on the Texas-Mexico Border. And that's why, as we were talking, that this is the other Roswell. Noe was talking about the other researcher, Zeckel, I keep mispronouncing his name.
Yeah, Todd Zeckel.
Yeah.
Was the one who initially followed up on this case. And one of the reasons we call it the other Roswell is that among UFO researcher circles in the late 60s and through the 1970s, this was being viewed as the top UFO crash retrieval story of that time. And this story had been developed, and it was, ready for publication. There had been a major documentary that had been done about it in the late 70s. And all of this was prior to Stanton Friedman's work on Roswell, New Mexico, his interview with Jesse Marcel, which led to the release of the very first book ever published about Roswell, New Mexico case, 1947. It was published in 1980 or 81. So, I mean, in some ways, the story of the UFO crash near Del Rio, Texas, was the first major UFO crash retrieval case in the U.S. that among UFO researchers.
Right.
Yeah, it was mentioned in the MJ-12 documents. On from Roswell, the other crash along the Texas-Mexican border. The other thing is we know there are other stories of other crashes in the United States as well as elsewhere throughout the world, but it's just that this is like a domino effect, Jack. The more you get into it, the more you keep digging, and more amazing amount of information that comes out of it.
Yeah. I just have to ask this real quick. I mean, digging into some of this stuff, because you always hear about the Men in Black, for instance, showing up and saying, you don't talk about this. Have you ever experienced anything like that? I mean, because you guys are really digging up some really important information, especially with getting these eyewitnesses to come forward now and say, yeah, this is doing this and that is doing that. Or have you even just decided to maybe do a Freedom of Information Act search on just yourself? See how many documents are out there about you guys?
Well, Jack, now that you mention it, I don't know how Ruben feels about it, but I hope no Men in Black are listening to this broadcast tonight.
Yeah, me too.
But the one thing about this is you never know. As Noe had mentioned earlier, I'm the director for Northern California MUFON, and so that's the other hat that I wear. And we're always, our investigators here in California, as well as in other parts of the United States, where we come across some very, very sensitive information. We don't know whether it's a black project, it's an actual military project, or it might be, the real deal. But the thing is that sometimes you get into an area that may have some repercussions, and so we have to always be very careful. And if we do get threatened, well, that's part of the course there. But we're dealing with some powerful forces out there. Yeah. But again, the word is to get the truth out.
True. So tell me a little bit about the investigation that you guys went out on. That's going to be appearing on the History Channel.
We had a really great experience working with the production crew from the History Channel, and in a minute, Ruben's going to talk about how the whole thing got started. My part of it was I came in, and Ruben had already been with the team for several days working on other cases in Mexico, but I came in, and Ruben and I together worked as technical advisors on the segment that has to do with the 1974 Coyame UFO crash, and it was fascinating. We went back, and we've been there several times to Coyame, a very small town, population 600 people. We got a chance to visit with the town's mayor and the mayor's wife and a number of other dignitaries. We went out exploring to the area where the incident is said to have occurred. We made some interesting discoveries on our previous trips. We found two sites of extreme interest in relation to this case. This case is about the crash, the mid-air collision between a small aircraft and an unidentified flying object. The debris from the airplane rained down to the Chihuahuan Desert below following the crash. The disc itself remained basically intact and was reportedly picked up and taken away by the U.S. military. The debris from the small airplane, it was unknown what happened to it, but during one of our recent visits to Coyame, we did find a debris field that was scattered over about a quarter of a mile, located north of the small town of Coyame. It was a small airplane from circa late 70s or early 80s, and we found this debris field with all kinds of metallic pieces from an airplane that had crashed there. The locals don't know very much about the circumstances behind this crash. They know that the plane had crashed there. Military came in and blocked anyone from getting anywhere near the scene. And so that remains a great mystery, and we don't know the exact tie-in until we do some further research. When the History Channel folks came in, they collected a lot of samples from that, and soil samples and so forth, and we're hoping that they're going to have some further information for us. But Ruben can come in and tell us about how he was contacted initially and some of the other cases that he worked on with the folks from UFO Hunters.
Here's something that just to go back just a little bit from what we were just talking about. If hopefully no men in black are listening to this program, Jimmy just sent this over to me. It's our stats for January. We have a total of the top 14 types of hits that we get on our website that listen in on the broadcast. Number 4 is U.S. government at 27,402 hits. Number 2, or right below that, number 5, is U.S. military at 14,403 hits a week.
Okay, now I'm nervous.
So,
CIA.gov.
Yeah. It's number 4 and number 5, U.S. government and U.S. military.
Well, hopefully we might get some more information from them on maybe some more anonymous letters sent.
Maybe. You never know. You never know what could snowball effect that would cause. Anyway, go ahead.
So, Ruben, when Ruben was touring northern Mexico in a bus going from coast to coast across Mexico and encountering Mexican military with armed with machine guns pointed right at the. I don't think that. I think Men in Black were the farthest thing from his mind at that point. Ruben, you have to share with the radio listeners your experiences in northern Mexico and having your bus boarded by the machine gun wielding soldiers and so forth.
It was
an experience.
It was. I mean, we initially we flew down to around to Tamaulipas to the northern area of Mexico. Apparently, several months back in October, September. In August, there was 2 reports of objects that had fallen, and we received this information from our Mexican contacts. And so, Mr. Bill Burns, he's the editor of the UFO magazine, was one of our speakers at the UFO Expo, which I had co-host, and we have that. It's an annual event. We had close to 1,500 people that attended this conference there, and Bill was one of our speakers, and Bill had told me, he says, we're doing a new TV series called UFO Hunters with the History Channel, and one of the things that we want to do is focus on both you and Noe's research on the Coyame crash, and we also want to follow up on a couple of other incidents that just came out recently. So within about a month, things just started to develop, and they got the production crew, we made our contacts, and we went down to that part of Mexico, and one was an object that fell into a field, and this involved the law enforcement, local law enforcement agencies. We interviewed them, as well as other officials, and what we found out that the SEDENA, which is the Secretary of National Defense, it's like the Pentagon branch of the military. Mm-hmm. They had actually went there and cordoned off and took away the materials. So, without saying too much before, I just wanted to share that little part of it. But we also came across, there was another event that happened at another town several hours later of an object that also hit some trees, mm-hmm. and there was a power outage in that area. And so we also interviewed some of the witnesses up there, and what's really fascinating is the fact that one of the witnesses had told me that that whole entire they had no communication. That he noticed that the police could not communicate at all. Their radio system was knocked out. But
that would tend to say that there must have been some very high UHF or VHF.
Yeah, electromagnetic frequency, something that would affect that area. So we're going to get into that in our expedition. And the thing that that fascinated me was that as we were talking to the witnesses, like we did in Coyame, was they were sharing. One man in general was telling me he said that he saw this spinning saucer-like craft. Mm-hmm. He said that him and his friend were driving and nearby, and they all of a sudden saw these beautiful lights, but it was just spinning and spinning around. And if you looked at it, he said he could see like this vortex of wind just moving all the trees and the branches underneath it. Hmm. And he said, and what was fascinating was that when we were there, one of the local papers had just published a story of where a number of motorists had pulled over because they saw this object that had just landed, and then it took off, and it was witnessed by at least 12 people. And this was headlines. This was headlines in the newspaper. But we're dealing with a hot area there, and so as we were going to Coyame, we had so much gear and equipment that it was decided that we would go on a bus. We actually rented a bus to for our crew. Well, in order to make time, we were on the bus for 25 hours from one stretch to get to Coyame, and we almost got robbed there, Jack. But I tell you, we were driving. Fascinating story. We were driving, and we pulled over. It's about 5 in the morning, and there's two bus drivers, and one guy sleeps, the other guy rotates, and in this rotation, we had a stowaway. This one guy stuck on board, and here we're all sleeping and everything, and then this guy gets up and walks out, and he asks the bus drivers if we could pull over, and this guy walks out, and then one of our other guys in our crew looks at me. He's like, "Who's he?" Well, this guy walked off and ripped us off. He took off he ripped off a camera and a computer.
Oh, no!
I mean, this guy was a pro. I mean, here we are asleep. He sneaks on our bus. So when we get to Coyame, as we're going toward Presidio, we're going to meet with Noe over there in Ojinaga, which is a border city right there by Presidio. And as we're pulling in, there's these military checkpoints, and so we come up to one, and one of the military officials says, "You guys have to get off your bus." And he says, "This is our way. We're fighting the war against drugs, and this is what we need to do." Yeah. So we said, "Sure." So he's wearing his fatigues, and you see a number of soldiers there. So he climbs on board, and I look over across the road, and there's a guy with this young kid with a machine gun aiming at us. And then I look on the other side of the road, there's another kid, that young man, aiming his gun at us. And I said, "Holy cow." And I told everyone, I said, "Hey, guys, don't take this like a joke." He says, we have machine guns aiming right at us, so don't do anything stupid.
Right.
So throughout the trip, a couple of times when we were out there on the crash site, as we were leaving, we had the soldiers out there, and they drove up in their Jeep. What's the one that we use quite frequently? Oh God, yeah, the type of Jeep that we're using in Iraq. I mean, these guys had the same uniform. A Humvee, yeah. This Humvee pulls up right in front of our bus, and the guy gets out, and he comes into our bus and starts talking to us, and then I happen to ask him, "Well, have you ever seen a UFO?" And he said, "Oh yeah." He says, "I saw a UFO when I was a child." He said, "I saw 3 orb-like objects flying above our school." He says, "It was really quite interesting." And I said, "Well, would you like to be interviewed?" He said, "No, I can't do that." He says, "We have to go through channels."
Oh.
Yeah, so interesting, but there's a lot to off the record.
Yeah, they'll talk to you off the record.
Off the record,
We also talked to several soldiers at the military checkpoint, at another military checkpoint. They told us amazing stories, objects, orbs of light that they see streaking across the sky at night, because they're there, of course, 24 hours a day. But they, the minute you reach for a paper to write anything down, or if you get your camera or anything, that's the end of it right there. They won't say anything on record.
Now, what you just said about objects streaking across the sky, I noticed in the trailer for this upcoming History Channel show that you're going to be in, that it looks like you have some night vision equipment that catches something going across the sky leaving the ground, going up.
Yeah, well, one thing about the UFO Hunters, it's a 13-part series.
Okay, so
we are
13.
Yes,
okay.
And so there's a whole story where Bill and the rest of the team, they go and visit other parts of the country, as well as Rendlesham in England, and they've hit a number of other hot spots. So this is the whole story that as they're out and they're meeting various... he would be an interesting guy to get on your show one of these days, there, Jack, to get Bill on your show, and he could talk more about the overall UFO hunters. But he basically, because of him, he helped us to arrange the whole focus on our research. And and hopefully, as Noe was mentioning, we went out there. They took samples, and this is something else that's really quite interesting. it gets really complicated when you're in another country and you're going to be taking samples or bringing across anything. You have to go through customs.
The ground samples, right?
Yeah, and so that becomes problematic. I mean, you have to claim it or you sneak it across. So obviously, you put yourself in jeopardy with if you bring something across and don't claim it.
Right.
I mean, what can you tell them? This is part of the UFO. Yeah, or you just say, well, I just brought out over some, I'm a junk collector or whatever. But this is some of the issues that that our team was confronted with when bringing over some of the soil samples.
I remember the strange looks that Ruben and I got. We had these rusty pieces of airplane crash debris, and we had a few pieces of aluminum from the airplane hull, and we had this pile of jagged, torn, partially burned pieces of this airplane that crashed out there in the Chihuahuan Desert. When we came up to a military checkpoint, and they asked us, there were these really tense moments where these machine gun wielding guys asked us, what exactly do you want with this stuff, and what is it? So we had to explain, and that was one of the cases where the soldiers were so impressed by the fact that we were UFO investigators that they started telling us their own UFO stories, strictly off the record, of course. I'm
sure that once they started to open up, that level of tension just kind of left the air, huh?
Oh yeah, I mean, I get really nervous with those weapons pointed right at you. Anybody would.
Yeah.
And the guys, I'll never forget. We were boarded at one point. We had just left the site of the small airplane crash with a crew from the History Channel. And we got boarded by Mexican soldiers who were doing a routine search out there in that area. And everybody on the bus was just so still. You had all these guys from the production crew that many of which I don't think had ever been to Mexico before.
No.
And that's when Ruben and I were very concerned that someone might say something jokingly in jest and our lives in jeopardy. So there were some tense moments.
Yeah.
And luckily at that point they didn't search us and find all the soil samples and airplane parts that we had in the bus's luggage compartment.
So what do you think, if they would have found that, what do you think they would have done?
Well, that's uncertain.
Yeah.
A lot of those soldiers don't have a very high level of formal education.
Right,
so
right.
A lot of times it's hard to know how they would react to something like that.
Sure.
And you're really at their mercy there, Jack. I mean, you can be way out there in the boonies and not come back. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we have to do.
I do want to impress on everyone that where this incident happened is a very isolated, remote area. The town of Coyame has about 600 residents, but the area where we found the airplane wreckage is quite a way out of town, and it's pretty barren out there. There's very little human beings ever go out there. There's these vast stretches of desert with nothing but cactus and rocks out there. Nothing grows very tall there. This is the Chihuahuan Desert area. There's hills and mountains all around, but it's very, very isolated, but it's beautiful in its isolation. Yeah. I mean, some of the pictures that we took there, some of the beauty, the desert scenery is just so awesome. The guys the guys that went with us from the History Channel, they were just awestruck by the beauty, the natural beauty of the area.
Sure.
And something that's very interesting is you can get on Google Earth and you can zoom in and you can see this. It's very clear. You see about this 30-foot circle of blackened dirt that was one of the sites of interest that we found. Do you have
a link to that we can throw up on the website?
No, unfortunately, no. But that's a great idea. We need to put one on there.
Yeah.
I'm going to send you that, Jack, so you can add it to your website. But you can zoom in on this, and you see the circle pattern, and this is what the guys from the History Channel took a lot of soil samples of, because within this 30-foot diameter blackened earth area, the soil in there is totally different in its composition and its texture and its feel than the soil outside of that circle. And also, that whole blackened circle of dirt is littered with metallic parts of every size, shape, and description. It's just as if something underwent an intense fire there, and possibly also was exploded into shreds.
What Noe is actually getting to is what we've been talking about is, could it be the parts from the military convoy, vehicles, parts buried in there? We don't know, but we found bits and pieces of vehicle parts, and we're trying to find out, well, why is it? And plus, as he said, it was discolored. What's interesting, there's no vegetation around that area, around that circle.
Where the crash is, right?
Or where this pit, or where the things are buried at. Yeah.
Right. Huh. Have you taken any of the debris that you recovered? Have you taken it anywhere to have that analyzed to see if there's been any type of radioactivity or anything like that? I don't know how long radioactivity would actually stay in metal or anything like that.
Actually, that's what the History Channel people are going to do. Is they have some experts that are involved in to help doing some of the analysis of what was collected. So we're really interested to see what they found.
So you don't even know what the results are until the show, right?
Exactly.
We are eagerly awaiting the History Channel debut of the UFO Hunter series, which, by the way, the series begins February 9th at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. That's the first show. That's not the show that we were involved in, but that's the beginning of the series. I'm sorry, February 6th. February 6th at 10 p.m. Eastern is the first show in the series, and we are tentatively scheduled to be the third program in the sequence of 13 shows, which would be, the date of that would be February 20th. But that is still subject to possible rescheduling as far as the sequence of the shows. But we are all eagerly awaiting the debut of the show. It's something that's going to be really unique. I know, working with Bill Burns and Dr. Ron Milione and Pat Uskert and the other members of the cast and crew, we found them to be highly professional, very serious about their research. This was an undertaking that involved more than just going out there and doing this because it would make an interesting show. They seemed to really want to get a scientific handle on what was going on and to get to the bottom of the facts of the case. So I was very impressed.
That's a monumental task right there. I mean, there's just so much to it, and it's been so long. It's, I really got to hand it to you guys. I mean, you guys have done a fantastic job of gathering information about this particular case. It's just unbelievable after all this time,
It was very clear to us that the objective of the making of this documentary was to actually try to actually bring out the facts of the case. It was not an attempt whatsoever to sensationalize or grab people's attention by saying UFO crash. It was really, these guys had copies of our books. They had marked pages. I remember, and Ruben, I don't know if you remember this, but we were in the middle of the desert trying to find those airplane parts.
Oh, yeah.
And Dr. Ron Milione, who is a college professor and has a background in physics and chemistry and was the main one collecting a lot of the samples. He was at
MIT.
Yeah, MIT grad. And he was holding up this, we were having trouble locating where the aircraft parts were that we had found on our previous visit. And all of a sudden he held up a copy of our book and was pointing to a picture in our book where we show this gentleman who had all the aircraft parts in front of him, and he was pointing to the surrounding mountains in the picture, and he was yelling at the top of his lungs that it looked to him as though the picture was right here, right there where he was standing. So everybody kind of rushed over to him. And it wasn't too long after that we found the aircraft debris there in the desert. So I mean, these guys were serious, and this is shaping up to be a really good show on the History Channel.
Oh, I can't wait. That's you know, and I don't want to spoil too much of it, but other than the debris that you found, I mean, and the story of the machine guns, yikes, you two. That's just you know, you just don't know what the heck's going to go on out there. But I don't want to spoil too much of it. But what else do you think? What do you think the results of everything is going to turn about? Do you have any idea?
Well, in terms of our research, where we're going with this, I think as one of our goals is to get the book translated in Spanish, and we've made some attempts to do that. Mm-hmm. I think once that book is translated in Spanish and it gets out among the Spanish-speaking community on both sides of the border, because one of the things that we found was that in doing our research that people will move or no longer are residents there. As Noe had mentioned, that Coyame is a little town of 600 people, but also outside of the town are these small little ranches where you have pockets of people, little settlements. That's where people live, and there's a whole network of these little ranches there. And so over the years, many of these people have relocated and have moved either to the United States across the border or elsewhere in Mexico. So when you're trying to find witnesses, this is the thing that we were coming across, is that with other investigators, they think they could just walk in and talk to anybody in town thinking they know something.
Right.
But a lot of these folks do not know. They don't have all the information. And so
I think definitely the next stage of this is we are really needing more people to come forward. This was a large-scale operation that involved members of the Mexican military. There was information within northern Mexico, members of the military, families of the military involved. It was an operation that involved members of the U.S. military, the recovery team, the subsequent taking of the artifacts to Atlanta, Georgia, and the possible involvement of the Centers for Disease Control in trying to verify whether or not there was some kind of biological threat present in the UFO crash artifacts. Now, there was a large-scale involvement, and it's going to take some additional individuals who are willing to come forward with knowledge that they may have seen, direct or indirect, regarding the crash of a UFO along the Texas-Mexico border in this time period. And if the events that unfolded around the 1947 crash near Roswell, New Mexico are any indication, then we are hopeful that we'll get to a point in time where people will start feeling comfortable about talking about this case as well.
Yeah.
One point I wanted to add was that we're networking with a number of Mexican UFO investigators, and there is an organization called OMIFO, which is the national organization, very similar to MUFON. Basically, it's a coalition of different organizations working under one umbrella. Mm-hmm. And what they're forming this organization. The head of that is his name is Jerónimo Flores, who is in the process of requesting that the Mexican federal government release their files.
Ah.
And so they have their Freedom of Information Act. Well, if that's possible, I mean, can you imagine that if, let's say, that we start finding out that there was a collaborative effort between both governments during the 50s on crash retrievals or other sightings, I think this may be the back door where we need the documentation. This is where we'll need assistance from our friends across the border.
Right, and one of the things that I want to point out is, whenever it comes to a story like this, something that's not really widely known, the people that do know something, if they're out there, wherever they may be, may be reluctant to talk about it, at whatever period of time because of the fact that it may be something that no one believes them on. And now with new light being shined on this, where there's some serious people looking to find the answers to this, that is willing to talk to them and willing to listen to them, they may start to surface.
This is a key point you made, Jack. Very early in our research, Ruben and I contacted Stanton Friedman, and we told him what our case was. We told him, Stanton, we don't have a great deal of first-hand direct information on this case. And what Stanton told us was, you guys, regardless of how much detail you have or don't have, you need to put something out there. I mean, this has to be brought forward, and then other information will start to come forward, as it did with Roswell, New Mexico.
Right.
So he really inspired and encouraged us. There was a point in time there where we didn't seem to be finding very much early on in the writing of our book, but he gave us the boost that we needed, and he told us, you need to put this out there. And ever since the book was published, we have gotten an incredible amount of feedback from folks who have known about similar incidents. We still are looking for more direct witnesses and evidence in this one case, but we have gotten quite a lot of positive feedback. We've gotten some amazing accounts from individuals who claim to have participated in UFO crash retrievals for the U.S. military over the years, not necessarily this one, including Sergeant Clifford Stone. And so information has been coming forward, and we're hoping that will continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that I do, and I believe this. And whenever you first told me this story, I said to myself, this is just the tip. This is just the tip. I have a feeling that there's going to be so much that comes out over this next year about not only this incident, but like you said, other incidents and more people coming forward that is really, if anything, and with anything like this, the more answers you get, the more questions you get, of course.
Yeah.
So, it's ongoing, but the connection, the collaborative connection with the Mexican military and the U.S. military is definitely an interesting one. And with the whole possible the CDC being involved here in Atlanta and that stuff being sent here, and the soil samples, I'm really looking forward to seeing what the results of all of this comes out to on the History Channel show.
Now, we have kind of a 1-2 punch going here because we're about to hit with our second book, which I think is going to open the eyes of a lot of people.
Yeah.
The whole story from a still living witness, the story of this Air Force colonel who was flying an F-86, saw the UFO. It was seen by other pilots in his squadron, saw it crash, visited the crash site, retrieved an unearthly piece of metal that he subjected to a number of metallurgic tests.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is an amazing follow-up story of another crash retrieval in the same general area.
One thing we forgot to mention about the consequences that he went through is basically his when he went to retire from the Air Force, his pension was denied.
Really?
Yeah, that's open. That's open. That's one of the reasons why he wants to come out and talk.
Right. What was the reason why it was denied? Did they say?
He wasn't given a direct reason.
Just that it was you not getting it.
And he's been battling this for quite a while. A lot of paperwork. In fact, in the book, in our second book, we're going to outline a lot of the struggle that he's gone through, especially a lot of his documents. There were a number of documents that were destroyed in the fire, but a lot of his military history files were destroyed in the fire in one of the buildings in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know whether that was intentional or what.
He has a feeling that the denial of the pension was a repercussion, but of course it's impossible to know for sure unless we found some documentation somewhere. But nonetheless, it remains one of the most fascinating UFO cases, and to have a still living witness to a major UFO case like this is just an amazing thing.
You know, and whenever they control exactly what you can and cannot see, when they control the information, or they can destroy it on a whim. I mean, for example, and this is one of the biggest ones that I highlight whenever it comes to cases like this. Let's take a look at, you know, Bob Lazar's and you know, his background and the agencies that he worked for, and then all of a sudden, you know, you've got the United States government coming out and saying, no, he's never worked for any of those agencies. Yet he's in the directory of the phone book. He's in a newspaper article saying that he worked for Los Alamos Laboratories. They just completely wipe out your information in an attempt to discredit you because of what you know.
Yeah. That's something we need to always be careful about. I mean, there's other investigators over the years that one way or the other, there'll be mysterious accusations or something that's attacked to credibility and anything to you know, provide us this information to basically nullify them there and destroy their credibility. So that's been an ongoing thing that we need to be careful about.
Now, this is a very interesting thing that's kind of unique to the United States to a large extent, and that is that whenever anybody comes out with a UFO story, they are immediately the center of great ridicule and shame.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like you are immediately branded one of these kooks that with the long robes and holding up a sign, "Beam me up, Scotty."
Right.
You know,
Heaven's Gates.
anything related to UFOs is immediately branded as something bizarre and totally, totally out of the ballpark. But it's not that way in other countries, and including Mexico. And there's a different culture, and they haven't gone through the levels of PR conditioning that has existed in this country, where people have basically been conditioned to regard anything related to UFOs as being a total nutcase scenario.
Right.
And, you know, we've been in contact with researchers in England and France regarding this Mexico's Roswell, as well as Mexico. And these researchers in these other countries, there's a lot more freedom of thought and expression regarding UFOs.
Right.
And people that come forward with UFO stories aren't immediately branded the way they are here.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's something that has to change.
Yeah, I fully agree with you on that, and it's just it boggles my mind when I come across someone that says that, you know, UFOs are just a big, huge hoax that some people buy into, and they really, then, like you said, they really ridicule you for even bringing up the subject in a serious note. But whenever you look at some of the people that, let's take our astronauts, for example. We've got video footage. We've got the STS videos. We've got astronauts that had gone to the moon that has reported UFOs flying alongside of them. They have so many credible people out there that says, you know what? There's something seriously to this. What it is what we want to find out. We want to know what the hell these things are exactly, and how much do we know, and most importantly, what are they doing here? Because the United States government, our governments aren't going to say anything. If they do, for what they do know about it, they're not going to say anything about it. So it's kind of up to us to figure it out on our own, in a sense.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the astronaut. A book I like to plug real quickly. It's called Leap of Faith by Gordon Cooper.
Ah, yes.
What a fascinating book. I couldn't believe that nearly 40% or 50% of his book is all about UFOs.
Right. Buzz Aldrin.
And his involvement. Yes, this is Gordon Cooper's biography.
Yeah.
It's a great book. I highly recommend it.
It's amazing. It's amazing to me. Well,
Jack, we have a lot more information about these cases we've been talking about tonight on our website, and I know you have a link to our website from yours, mexicosroswell.com.
Yes.
We've got audio clips and video clips, and we've got information about the upcoming UFO Hunters series and a lot of other good stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a place where people can contact us if they prefer to have it be anonymous. They can contact us through the website without revealing their identity. So we invite everyone to go to mexicosroswell.com and check it out.
Jack, I'm amazed how 3 hours have gone by.
Yeah, I know. It goes
so
by
quickly,
quick, doesn't it?
We'd also like to sell some copies of our book. I'm sure people will find it interesting. We go into a lot more detail about what we've talked about tonight in our book, Mexico's Roswell.
Yeah.
It's available for $13.95 at all the major online bookstores and at many local bookstores. You can also order it from our website, mexicosroswell.com.
Which would probably be the best way because you can get it a lot quicker. I know, well, especially for some of those that are living out there in the small towns. I actually got an email after our last time we had you guys on, and they went to their local bookstore and they had to specifically order it through there. They had to actually order it down, and they emailed and they actually emailed and said that they got the book and they were so excited because they were so inspired around some of the information, and they said the story, and I sent an email back saying you should have just went to their website, but I'm glad you got the book, and we'll be having them on again soon. So, it's like you said, the 3 hours goes by fast. I know there's so much more we could get into about this, but what I want to do is I want to see about everything that comes out on the History Channel show, and let you guys have some time to see whatever information actually comes to surface after that, because I have a feeling you're going to have a lot more information surfacing after that.
We'll love to be back again there, Jack. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show, and we'll do our best to come out with the latest. And again, we just appreciate the great support that you have provided us.
Most definitely. And the email that I got from you, Noe, actually about the upcoming show, I sent it over to Jimmy right away and had him post that up. We couldn't get the actual trailer, the most recent trailer up there, but we got another one close to it up there on the site. So any information...
If people will be watching your website, I'll send you the screen capture of the Google Earth showing this mysterious scar in the Earth where this supposedly happened.
Definitely, yeah. If you send that over to me or Jimmy, we'll definitely get that up there. I like the fact that we can actually put up information where the listeners can get interactive with and see it for themselves and kind of get hands-on with it. So, any information you ever send over, we'll definitely get that up there on the site.
Great, and plus the plane debris is also, we have some samples of that on our website so the viewers can also see what we're holding.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, we are out of time.